Let's talk about executive orders. Because as you know, our convicted felon president has already started issuing executive orders left and right. Of course, we knew he was going to do this. They told us that this was their plan. They told us there would be shock and awe in terms of the number of executive orders that he was going to issue beginning on day one. And he did. And that's obviously going to continue. But by doing so much by executive order, as is obviously their plan, they are committing an enormous strategic blunder that is actually going to do great damage to Trump's long-term agenda. Now, I'm going to explain that in a minute, but before I do, I think it's important that we understand what an executive order is, and more importantly, what an executive order is not. Because there seems to be a great deal of confusion about this. And of course, that is made all the worse because our pathetic media does such a pathetic job of actually covering the substance of any issues. In large part because most of them don't understand any of the issues themselves. But be that as it may, there does seem to be a good deal of confusion. So what an executive order is really nothing more than the president issuing an order to his executive branch. That's really all an executive order is. It's telling them how he wants them to do their job, or a statement of executive branch policy about how to implement or how to carry out Trump's constitutional duties. All right? What an executive order is not is law. Executive orders have no force of law unless they are issued lawfully pursuant to a law passed by Congress. If Congress specifically gives him the authority to do something, then a lawful order issued pursuant to that, would have the force of law. But Trump just doing something on his own, absent congressional action, has no force of law whatsoever. So at best, all it is an order to his executive branch. And it's important to keep in mind the separation of powers built into our constitutional system. So we have the three branches of government. And the Constitution gives to each of the branches a specific set of authority and power. And no branch has any authority to exercise the authority of any other branch. So Article 1 of the Constitution sets up Congress and gives them the power to make law. Article 2 sets up the presidency and gives the president the power to enforce law, to execute the law. Hence, it's called the executive branch. And then Article 3 sets up the courts and gives them the authority to resolve cases and controversies that arise under the law. So that's it. So only Congress in our system has the authority to make law. So nothing that Donald Trump will do by executive order can change or make law. Right? So let us keep that in mind. And another thing that's important to keep in mind, specifically with respect to Donald Trump, is that he has a history of issuing completely meaningless executive orders. In fact, many of the orders he issued yesterday are largely meaningless. They don't really do anything. And he did this all the time during his first administration because he knows that his cult followers are stupid. And he knows that they're going to, praise him no matter what he does or doesn't do. And he knows that all he has to do is claim that he did something, and that's good enough for them because they're too stupid to know the difference. So Trump did it many, many times. He would issue an executive order claiming to have done something. It would be reported that way because, again, our media is so pathetic, they won't even bother to read the executive order. And even if they did, they probably wouldn't understand what they were reading anyway. So they just go along and report whatever Donald Trump says he did as if he actually did it. When in fact, the executive order didn't do anything. It was really nothing more than a policy statement. but he pretended that he did something, and that's good enough for his cult. And so this is one of the ways in which he got them to believe that he was such an accomplished president, because he issued all these executive orders. They're just not smart enough to realize that those executive orders didn't actually do anything. And so he's going to do that a lot. He already started doing it yesterday, and he's going to do it even more. But to the extent that he does things substantively by executive order, here's the problem. Here is how what he is doing is an enormous strategic blunder. And that is, as I explained, none of this has the force of law. And anything that he does by executive order can be undone by executive order. I mean, look what he did yesterday. He completely reversed, most, if not all, of Joe Biden's executive orders with the stroke of a pen on day one. Didn't need an act of Congress, nothing. He just overruled those executive orders, threw them out by issuing new executive orders. And so anything that he does can be just as easily undone by the next president. And here's where the real blunder is. Here's why it's such a strategic blunder. Because he will attempt to do so many things by executive order, and by doing so, there's no reason for Congress to do anything. So if you want to enact real changes to the law, you need to pass legislation in Congress, all right? By doing so much by executive order, the pressure will be off of Congress to do anything. So if Trump does something, they don't feel the need to do the same thing. Trump's already done it. He's already done that issue. And that's fine with Congress because they don't want to do anything. That place is a hot freaking mess. I mean, Republicans have the slimmest of majorities in the House. They're going to have a hard time passing anything. And so if Donald Trump is going to do something by executive order, their position is going to be good. Then we don't have to do it. And so they won't even bother. And so by Donald Trump doing so much by executive order, he is going to almost guarantee that those policies that he purports to do by executive order will not actually be enacted into law by Congress. And so to the extent that those executive orders actually have any effect at all, the next president can come along and just undo it with the stroke of a pen and completely, reverse Donald Trump's entire legacy, really. If you want to have a lasting policy legacy as president, you have to go through Congress. Or else the next president can just wipe it all away, as Donald Trump just proved yesterday by getting rid of so many of Joe Biden's executive orders. That very same thing can and will happen to Donald Trump. So Donald Trump has 4 years, and he can issue all these executive orders he wants. And if that's all he does, essentially, I mean, what is Donald Trump actually going to accomplish? Right? We're all worried about all the damage he's going to do to this country, and he will. And he could do a lot of damage through executive order by changing policy within the administration about how they do things, and issuing regulations and those kinds of things. He can and will do great damage. But how much of it is going to be of any permanence? What is he actually going to get through Congress? Tax cuts? What else? What else has he even talked about doing by going through Congress and passing law? Pretty much everything he has talked about during the campaign and even today, he's going to do through executive order, which is the stupidest way of doing anything because it has no lasting effect, no force of law, and can be easily wiped away. And that's what's going to happen. And while Donald Trump will do great damage while he is in office, understand that all of that can be undone. Well, at least the policies can be undone to the extent they were done through executive orders. Now, much of the damage caused by his executive orders, a lot of that will not be able to be undone. I mean, damage done to people's lives cannot easily be undone, and some of those things will, the damage will be permanent. But the policy doesn't have to be permanent. And that is a huge mistake. And this is where Donald Trump's stupidity and laziness is going to be an advantage politically to Democrats. Because Donald Trump is too stupid. He doesn't care about the future, honestly. And he doesn't care about most of these policies either. Once he's out of office, he doesn't give a shit. Right? He's going to be unaffected by any of this. He's getting what he wants. He got his get out of jail free card. He's ripping off the cult to tunes of billions of dollars with his Trump coin and everything else, all the other things he's doing to grift money off of them. He's getting in bed with all these oligarchs with whom he's making all kinds of deals to enrich himself once he leaves office. So he's getting what he wants. He doesn't give a shit about policy. He just wants to make it look like he's doing a lot. And don't get me wrong, he will do a lot. And a lot of the people he surrounds himself with certainly do care about the policy. So they will do things of substance, things that do great damage. But in terms of the long term, he doesn't care. He really doesn't care. And he's lazy. He's not going to put in the work to try to get things passed through Congress, especially given the hot mess that Congress is. It's going to be very difficult dealing with them. And so his dictatorial inclination will just be, well, I don't need them anyway. I'll just issue an executive order. Go right ahead, Donnie boy, because not only will everything you do be subject to the next president just wiping it away with the stroke of a pen, a lot of the things that he tries to do by executive order will be immediately put on hold by the courts. I'll give you a perfect example. Birthright citizenship. So Trump issued an order changing the executive branch's interpretation of the 14th Amendment to not necessarily mean that anyone born on American soil is automatically a citizen. Right? I don't want to get all caught up in the substance of that constitutional argument. This is the point for today's discussion. So he issued this order on birthright citizenship. It's already been challenged in the courts. The ACLU has already filed a lawsuit. What's probably going to happen there is that executive order is going to be enjoined until the courts sort all this out. And ultimately, it will be the courts who will determine what the 14th Amendment says about birthright citizenship, what the language of the 14th Amendment actually means. It's not Donald Trump. It will not be up to Donald Trump. Donald Trump's action yesterday simply will be the catalyst for getting it into the courts, and the courts will decide, because it's not up to Trump to decide what the law is. Right? That's the job of the courts. So anyways, the point is that executive order is already going to be tied up in the courts. And he will issue many more executive orders that where the exact same thing happens. They'll be tied up in the courts. And even if ultimately Trump's executive order is upheld by the courts, that doesn't save the executive order from, again, being wiped away completely by the next president. All right? And so this is why it is such a strategic blunder. If his goal is to actually change American law and have lasting effect. But Donald Trump really doesn't care about that. Anyway, that is the blunder. That is the long-term strategic blunder that will work to Democrats' benefit, right? And it should give you at least put into perspective the things that Donald Trump is doing. Because again, although he will do great damage, at least all of his policies that are enacted through executive order, all of those can be done like that on day one. On day one. That's how easily it can all be undone. So just keep that in mind as you see all these executive orders being signed over the next 4 years. Every damn one of them, every one, without exception, can be undone like that on day one by the next president. Anyway, it's important to keep that in mind. So thank you so much for watching. Be well, and I'll talk to you again soon.